common for organizations to use multiple clouds, including a mix of public, private, and hybrid. The multi cloud model introduces added complexity to cloud identity and access management, however, especially with identity now at the front of the modern security perimeter. Hello, everyone, and welcome to another episode of Analytics Insight podcast, where we talk about the latest developments and the tech innovations that are shaping different industries. And I'm your host, Priya Dayalani. Now, with more organizations moving to cloud and adopting hybrid work models, managing identity security has become a complex and often a daunting task. Now, in today's discussion, we will cover some key challenges in this space, how AI and automation are transforming privileged access management, and also study and evaluate how organizations are shifting from a reactive to a proactive security strategy. So let's welcome Barak Feldman, Senior Vice President, Go-to-Market Strategy and Excellence at CyberArk. Hi, Barak. How are you doing?
I'm great, Priya. Thanks for having us. Thanks for having me here.
Great. It's a pleasure to have you with us, Barak. And of course, we'll be diving deep into the role of AI and automation as to how it is enhancing identity management and identity security. But before that, we would love to know more about CyberArk. So, if you could tell us more about the specialization of the company and the specific solution the company is offering, we would be glad to hear about it.
Absolutely, yeah. So CyberArk Software, we've been around for 25 years now, listed on the Nasdaq, publicly traded organization. We were born in the space that called the privileged access management space. We pioneered the space, and we've been leading that market for many years. The idea of privileged access management was how do we make sure we secure the keys to the kingdom, right? The highest risk users in the organization that had the most power and the most sensitive access. We were securing it both internally, meaning let's make sure that those powerful users are controlled, are audited, are accountable for, but also external threats, external attackers. That's usually where they went after, right? It's common sense. If they can take over the most powerful administrative users, the most powerful users in the organization, they can create more damage, they can hide their trail, and so on. So that was where we came from, is kind of securing the crown jewels, the highest risk accounts. But the auditors and regulators went after that as well. Again, makes sense. They said, for every organization, can you account for all these very powerful accounts and users? It evolved into a category or a space that we now call identity security. And the idea of identity security, and Priya, we'll talk a lot about it today, is, the world has evolved. You mentioned multi-cloud, you mentioned AI. The world has evolved to a point where there's a lot of different identities and environments today that require, or we're delegating privileged access to, and it's no longer just those IT users that have powerful or high privilege access. How do we now evolve this PAM space into all the identities in the organization? And that's really where CyberArk's heading towards, and what we're trying to kind of spearhead, right, and lead.
Great. Thank you for giving us that overview of CyberArk. And it's really fascinating to hear about the company and also the specialized work it is involved into. It's quite clear that CyberArk is playing a very pivotal role in streamlining identity security and ensuring that that the new challenges that come with the use of cloud are being addressed effectively. Moving forward, we would also like to know more about your personal role and contributions within the organization, Barak. And I think you have a deep technical and business background with over 20 years of experience in designing and implementing security and compliance solutions, which are focused mainly on privileged access, secrets management, least privilege. So, tell us more about your journey, how it's been till date, your role and contribution towards the company. We would like to hear that.
No, I appreciate it. Again, I've been with CyberArk for pretty much since the beginning, a little over 20 years. So kind of saw both CyberArk and also the space, right? The actual category of PAM evolve with our customers, right? It was, it has been, right, a fascinating journey, right? To see not only CyberArk, but also our partners, our customers. We have, customers in India, right? That have been with us for 10, 15 plus years, and see how the requirements, the use cases, right, evolve. My personal journey again is really responsible for, as the title says, right? It's what is our kind of go to market and sales strategy. It's being responsible for what we call our center of excellence. So really, if you think about our charter, it's how do we translate the vision and the strategy that our executive team and our engineering team comes up with, and how do we translate that into real customer needs, customer outcomes, customer requirements, and use cases, and vice versa, right? My team specifically is very close to the field. We meet customers constantly. We listen, right, and we try to take what we hear and make sure we also bring it back, right, and make sure it evolves or develops, right, into good solutions, right, of the future. So we kind of sit in that in the center, right, of between our strategy and vision, and then how do we actually go to market, or how do we talk to our customers in a way that is relevant and addresses real problems.
Right, yes. Thank you so much helping us listeners understand about your journey and what you're passionate about mostly. And now to kick things off, let's talk about the most common challenges companies face in managing identity security in hybrid and multi-cloud environments. Because in today's interconnected world, organizations rarely rely on a single environment. They are running critical operations across on-premises systems, hybrid clouds, and multiple cloud service providers. So this kind of introduces a new layer of complexity for managing identity security. And one of the challenges that I feel is simply visibility. With so many platforms in play, it's difficult for organizations to have a complete view of who has access to what, especially when you factor in privileged accounts or third-party vendors and even temporary contractors. So we would like to know from you, what are the common challenges that organizations face when managing identity security, especially in hybrid and multi-cloud environments?
Yeah. So Priya, you kind of you hit pretty much the big problem is, if you look at the past, organizations had a very controlled. It may have been very complex, right? If you're a large bank or a large telecom, it could have been complex, but it was still very defined, right? You had your boundaries of your data center, and you knew what you need to control, and it was fairly manageable. You could do it through, let's say, again, a single Active Directory and in a single kind of let's call it a role management, governance, and so on. The challenge today, and you said it right, as we move into, it's not just multi-cloud, but you're moving into a SaaS environment with DevOps and automation, and I'm sure we'll talk about AI. It suddenly becomes a very complex web of identities and assets that you need to protect. More and more organizations are allowing managed services into their organizations, or allowing third-party vendors, fourth-party vendors, right? And again, I mentioned automation. What it means, if I try and summarize the challenges, I'll try and summarize it in four major areas. The first one is, there's a massive amount of new identities that you need to manage, right? Now you have, and I mentioned them, right? The automation, the vendors, the cloud identities, workload identities, and so on. So how do we approach them differently from how we approached them in the past? Not only we have new identities, these new identities are, as I mentioned earlier, we delegate a lot of privilege access to those new identities, right? A business owner can do a lot more today than they were able to do 5-10 years ago. 5-10 years ago, they had to go to IT to do something for them. Today, they can do more stuff, and we need to make sure we secure it. So new identities is one. The second part is we have, and that's the part you already touched upon, Priya, and that is we have new environments, new assets, new infrastructure that we need to protect, and it looks different than how it did before. So now we have to have a strategy of how we secure multi-cloud, how we secure our SaaS environment, our DevOps environment, AI, etc. The third element is, because we have new identities and new environments, the attackers have innovated as well, right? So now you have new types of attack methods that we need to approach, of course, differently. Here, I do want to make a comment. The attackers are technically doing the same thing. What I mean by that is, 15 years ago, attackers went after privilege access and high risk assets. They're doing the same thing right now. They're trying to find these very powerful users to take over, and by that, getting access to critical data, critical infrastructure. The big difference is the attack surface is much bigger because of the new identities and new environments. Again, I no longer need to get to a Linux admin or a Windows admin in order to attack the organization. I can just take over a business owner or even a third party user or some kind of an AI or automation. But also the tools that they can use are much more innovative, right? So they can get in to our organization much faster. A lot of it is because of remote work and more globalization, digitalization, right, of our environments. There's just better tools for the attackers that they can go after. The fourth area where we're seeing, again, a new type of challenge, let's call it, for our customers and the industry, is the noise that is in the market, right? We see a significant amount of vendors, of technologies, of solutions, of service providers, and it is very difficult for customers to navigate right through this. And you're hearing a lot of conversations around, the term is vendor consolidation, but I actually think it's more around, we call it consolidation of trust, because no customer, and that would not be our recommendation, will have one vendor doing it all. But the idea of consolidation of trust means that you have your 3-4 strategic partners, and we have to make sure that it works well together, that there's that it actually is adding value to your challenges. And really the area that we need to make sure is that we are navigating, again, as I mentioned, through the noise, to see an incremental value, to focus on the outcomes of what you need to accomplish. Again, it could be very overwhelming to try and solve these new identities, new environments, new attack methods. And the secret sauce is to prioritize and focus and make sure we're seeing incremental value. And that, I think, is going to be a big change going into the future, specifically around identity.
Great. Thank you so much, Barak, for breaking down these challenges so clearly. And listening to it, it definitely feels it's a very complex landscape, no doubt. And given with these issues of visibility and lack of centralized control and these sophisticated techniques these hackers are using, it's clear that organizations face significant hurdles in managing identity security across such diverse environments.
Mm-hmm.
Moving ahead now, I spoke about managing privilege access management as well. And again, when you talk about this in the hybrid and multi-cloud environments, it's again a challenge. But here, I guess automation and AI are stepping up to kind of transform how the privilege access management is
Mm-hmm.
handled. Now, traditionally, there were tools. I mean, they were effective, no doubt, but they kind of heavily relied on manual processes, which were slow and also error prone.
Yeah.
So, gradually, as organizations scale their operations, automation has become quintessential in such scenarios. So, when you're automating time consuming and manual tasks, they can reduce the risk of human error, they can tighten security controls, and also respond to threats in real time. So, how do you think that automation and AI are changing the privilege access management landscape?
Yeah, no, it's a great question, and you're spot on. I'll kind of I'll try and build it up, Priya, right? Because the
Yeah.
PAM, for many years, right, the way customers approached privilege access management was you had those break glass service accounts, firewall IDs. Again, we call them the keys to the kingdom, and those are the powerful accounts that again, as I mentioned earlier, attackers. They're the ones that the attackers really wanted to go after, but also the auditors and the regulators and compliance standards. They wanted to make sure that organizations know what's going on, right, with these accounts, and that's usually where they focused on. I want to emphasize before I go into the future that this problem still exists and it will probably not go away, right? We may have less of them, and to your point, Priya, they may not be used operationally, but those keys to the kingdom are still going to be there. We see it even in the cloud environments, with global admins and different types of root and admin accounts. And, those still will be there, and we need to make sure we secure them and not forget about them. Having said that, we are, to your point, moving into the future, and we have to make sure that that user experience is taken into account, that speed to value, but also operational efficiency, right? That's something that is extremely important to the industry today. We have to move in a much faster pace. So that means that we need to move in two major areas. One is on the human side, right? When I say human, the interactive users that have privilege access, right? So human beings that need to elevate their access into a certain system, we need to move into more of a, what's called, again, federated access and just in time. Federated means that I now use my own personal user. So Priya logs in as Priya into the specific environment that you want to log into. Just in time means that you only are given the access for the time that you need it. Again, the goal is to, number one, reduce the attack surface or the attack time, right? So if you're only logged in, if the privilege access is only available for the 10 minutes that you're logged in, we just reduce the time that an attacker can potentially take over. But it also improves user experience because you're just using the native access in the way you logged in. You don't have to go to a PAM solution in order to do your job, right? And that's really the big change here. We've also introduced this concept of zero standing privileges, which means that when you log off, that access is completely taken away, right? So it's more than just in time. It means that when you log in and when you log off, the access is given and taken away, whether it's cloud, whether it's a workload like a Windows or a Linux, whether it's a database. We need to make sure that the access itself only exists for the time that you logged in. On top of that, on the interactive access, you also want to start enforcing least privilege. Least privilege means that you only have the permissions you need in order to do your job. You don't necessarily need full admin rights in order to do it, and we need to make sure we implement that. On the non-human side or the non-interactive, and there will be more and more. This is where we believe at CyberArk the real challenge of identity security is going to be in the next few years, and that is all these automation and bots and service accounts and programmatic access that is being developed. We need to make sure that we secure those identities that have a significant amount of power. Again, automation and AI and AI identities and so on have a lot of access, and we need to make sure that on the one hand, they can still have the access and do the job that they're tasked to do. But on the other hand, make sure that attackers cannot take over those accounts. And here, you're really going to see a move into more, again, secrets management, certificate management, which is part of an acquisition that we made here at CyberArk, is to expand our reach into certificate lifecycle management and workload identities. But even managing secrets on cloud native vaults like AWS or Google or Azure, that a lot of developers are now using. They store their secrets in those environments. We need to make sure we provide visibility into where these secrets are and what they're being used for, but also, of course, manage them. So again, as I summarize, the evolution of PAM will be in two major ways. Again, I'll talk about other sub ways, hopefully, as we go on. But two major ways. On the interactive side, the move into more federated, just-in-time, dynamic, zero standing privilege access. On the non-human side, really a kind of let's call it the next gen of secrets management in both cloud native vaults, certificate management, etc.
Thank you for that insightful answer and giving an explanatory response as to how AI and automation are making such a significant impact in PAM. And as you mentioned, I think automation, just-in-time access, and using AI for behavior monitoring are kind of game changers for managing PAM more securely. And in one of the responses, I mean, in this response, actually, you mentioned about the zero standing privileges. I think
Yeah.
that's kind of gaining more traction because the idea behind a zero trust is very simple, like never trust, always verify. So in this model, like no user or machine is trusted by default, whether they're inside or outside the network. But you want to understand more about the zero standing privileges. So can you highlight more on that and help our listeners understand more about it?
Yeah, absolutely, Brianna. And I just spent a week in Mumbai and met a lot of customers in
Ah,
India, and
right.
it's amazing, to your point, how much the industry in India, right, is heading that direction as well. So
Yeah, yeah,
it shows kind of the the advance, right, and cutting edge technologies, both in the
yeah.
banking side, the software, the even telecom and manufacturing. And
Right.
just to explain again what it is, if you think about the past, it was, even though we had a very strong secured way to manage privilege accounts, the privilege accounts themselves were persistent or permanent, right? Meaning they existed on the target system. It's just we made sure that you can't access it without some kind of a workflow or permission, and that everything is audited and managed and recorded. Again, a very secured way of doing things. But the privilege account itself was persistent. And as we grow into more dynamic environments, elastic, ephemeral environments like multi-cloud and SaaS environments and workloads in the cloud and so on, the need to move into a much more dynamic way of provisioning access is there, right? And also operationally, it makes a lot more sense. It's very difficult to provision and deprovision persistent accounts in a dynamic, scalable environment. So the idea of zero standing privileges is as again when I log in, and this could be to my cloud console or CLI, meaning again an AWS, Azure, or GCP cloud, or a Windows Linux database that happens to be deployed in a workload in the cloud. When I log in, the privilege access, whether it's a role, again, it could be an identity access or an IAM role on the cloud, it could be an actual admin account on a Linux or Windows or database environment. That account or role does not exist, right, at all, right? So if an attacker somehow makes their way into those systems, they don't have the full admin rights that they want in order to perform their attack. The way that zero standing privileges work is based on my role or attributes. If I need to elevate my rights on a certain system, I can, of course, request it. I can go to some kind of a workflow, maybe a two-factor authentication. Again, you can decide on the flow. But based on my authorization, when I log in, that access is given to me just for the time I need it, right? So it's created on the fly, and I get the entitlements I need in order to do my job. Of course, I'll be recorded, right? So there's the audit trail around it. You can decide the right permission sets, right, for that particular role. But it should all be agentless, right? It should be as easy as possible and as operationally efficient as possible. But when I log off, that access again is taken away, right? So it only exists for the time that you're logged in. And I mentioned earlier, I want to emphasize that the main advantage is that we're reducing the attack vector and the attack surface, I would even say exponentially, right? Because it only exists for the time that someone logs in, and now you have a lot more visibility control over that access. So that's really the idea of kind of that combination of just-in-time and zero standing privileges.
Right, yeah. Thank you for an insightful explanation again on the zero standing privileges. And it's really, I mean, with zero standing privileges, the organizations are only allowing access when it's absolutely needed, and it seems like a very excellent way to limit the exposure of sensitive data. And it's fascinating to see how these frameworks are reshaping identity security from the ground up. And
Yeah.
while discussing about these things, I think it's clear that these approaches require a cultural shift more than a technological one as well. And with a number of challenges like we discussed earlier, I think a lot of best practices have also emerged that help elevate these challenges and ensure that identities and access controls are secure and effective across cloud environments. But earlier, I think the risk-based approach ensures that security measures are proportional to the threat rather than a blanket one-size-fits-all policies. So when you're talking about the evolving times, I think we already know about how AI and automation are helping us, adopt or shift to a more proactive strategy. So
Mhm.
I want to understand how can organizations shift from a reactive security approach to a more proactive approach, and what do you think is the role of AI here?
Yeah, it's thank you for bringing it up, because I think I mentioned it briefly earlier, and maybe it's a good time to go into a little more into the
Mm,
weeds, because because you have so many potential, right, use cases and challenges with these new identities, new environments, automation, and so on. The need to prioritize and focus, right? If we all agree that this challenge is way more complicated today, right? It means that we need to focus and simplify, right? Everything. We need to make sure that we see value, right? And that we always talk at CyberArk around a measurable risk reduction, right? Meaning that you can look at your environment and say, I am in a better shape than I was 3 months ago or 6 or 9, and have a very clear objective of what is the future, right? What is our next group of either systems or users that we want to protect, and what was considered success. So again, the need to prioritize and focus, regardless of AI. I'm going to get to AI, of course, but regardless of AI, there's a strong need, and a highly, again, both CyberArk and our partners, right, our system integrators, our service providers, we constantly highlight the need to to focus. It's one of the reasons that CyberArk invested significantly on discovery capabilities, right, and visibility. So the ability to look at your environment and say, hey, here's what we found, here's the potential risk. Now let's decide together, right, what's the most important thing to tackle next, and what kind of value it will bring us, right? It's also easier to communicate that way, both to the business and to the board and the leadership and the auditors, on, hey, here's why we're focusing on this group of systems or assets or users, which leads us into AI, because AI will give us the ability to automate everything I just said and do it much faster, right? The ability to say, hey, based on specific threats or risks or behaviors, here's number one, the recommendation of what to do next. But in a perfect world, let's even automatically enforce it, right? So some of the areas that we invested here at CyberArk that we believe the industry is going to go to as well is this concept of, hey, I detected something or I found something, and again, at the very least, let's recommend what to do. At the very best, let's automatically start enforcing it, so we can start implementing the right solutions faster, right? So that's one area. I will say that AI also introduces new risks, right? And we need to make sure that we also help our customers and the industry securing kind of these new type of AI identities that are out there, and make sure that, again, I mentioned secrets management or certificates. Again, a lot depends on how it's being implemented. But that's another area that will be fascinating to see, right? How it develops as we, what we believe, exponentially grow the number of identities that now have access to our data. But the main thing, Priya, is, again, AI will give us the ability to make decisions faster, to prioritize, to focus, and in a perfect world, automatically enforce, so we don't have to manually, onboard accounts, set up policies, things like that.
Well, yes, that definitely makes a lot of sense, and it's really important to have a more of a proactive approach when you're talking about, staying ahead of the curve in terms of ensuring identity security and the overall cybersecurity landscape, I would say. Having said that, I think as we look ahead, the future of identity security will undoubtedly be shaped by advancements in AI and machine learning. We'll also see more of AI-driven automation taking over routine security tasks, freeing up humans to focus on more high-level strategy. So, one last question for you, Barak. How do you see the future of identity security management and the overall cybersecurity landscape?
I think, again, it's a great way to summarize everything we talked about today, right? I think the future is, first of all, an acknowledgement that every identity in the organization has some level of privilege access, right? We're in a world today where, and we've seen it already in the attacks that have happened in the last few years, where you don't need a traditional privileged user today in order to attack an organization, right? You can do it through either some kind of an automated user, you can do it through a third-party user, or even a non-traditional privileged user. So the real future is understanding that every identity, no matter whether it's human or interactive or non-human, non-interactive, or whether it's an internal employee or an external workforce, that understanding that every identity is some level of privilege is going to be the kind of the let's call it the table stakes of an identity security program. The second part is, as I mentioned, it's going to be a lot around how do we, I'll call it consolidate, right? This concept of enforcing policy with kind of the discovery right, of accounts. It's more than discovery. It's visibility into risks and potential threats, right? And I think that part of automating that part, marrying these two, and again, AI will help us do it, into this idea of, hey, I discovered something based on what it looks like. I think this is the policy that needs to be enforced, and then constantly, right, updating it. I think that will be the second part, and then the third piece that I mentioned, and needs to be talked about more, is that move to what we call machine identity, or non-human. More and more of the future will be automated, right? And therefore the identities of the future, that will have high risk access, are going to predominantly be automated, in a form of whether it's AI or DevOps, or pure APIs. And we need to make sure, right, that we have the right security controls around them, the right audit. Which maybe leads me to one last thing I'll add, Priya, is we're seeing, and I've heard it when I was in Mumbai, and we see it globally. I think there's going to be a lot of innovation around audit and regulators and standards and frameworks out there, right? So it's good. It's good for the industry because it could guide us on where to focus and prioritize, right? So I think there'll be an innovation on the regulator side, right, and how auditors will look at it, and it will provide us guidance, right, on where to focus on, and how to prioritize. So that's another area that I believe, right, will be a lot of innovation.
Well, yes, definitely. And I think the future of identity security is evolving rapidly. And as AI and automation continue to play, larger roles, companies will be better equipped to protect the sensitive data, prevent breaches, and even streamline the security operations. And
Mhm.
finally, we can definitely anticipate a greater emphasis on identity security integration. So, rather than using disparate tools for cloud, on-premise, or hybrid environments, I think we'll see more of a unified identity management platforms that can handle everything from human to machine identities across all environments. And like you said, more developments in the regulatory and compliance landscape is definitely kind of the need of the hour. And I hope gradually we would definitely have those regulations come into play and enhance the entire security landscape. Well, thank you so much, Barak. It was a pleasure having you with us today, and thank you for giving insights on identity security management, the role of AI, and how does the future look like in the coming years. Thank you so much for your insights.
Yeah, thank you, Priya. I really enjoyed the conversation as well, so I really appreciate being here. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Barak. This is for our listeners. Thank you so much for tuning into this episode of Analytics Insight podcast. If you found our today's discussion insightful, be sure to subscribe and share it with your network. Until next time, stay safe, knowledgeable, and secure. Thank you so much.